Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 4 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the use of 3D in retail and beyond. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Beck Besecker, co-founder and CEO of 3D Cloud by Marxent. Beck, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Before we get started, why don't you give a little background on yourself as well as what you're currently doing in your current role?
Yeah, so I've been in generally the marketing technology space for 25 years, sort of cloud-based content management solutions. Started a company in the early 2000s, sold NCR around the targeted marketing space. And then this company, Marxent, has been around for about 11 years. We're one of the very early entrants into the 3D content management space, particularly for use cases in and around retail and commerce. And, we work with, folks like Ashley Furniture, Macy's, Lowe's, and large enterprise retailers, helping them execute their 3D commerce strategies.
Great. Well, so let's get started here. Talk about the use of 3D in retail. How would you describe the current state of 3D usage in retail by the average retailer as opposed to industry leaders?
Sure. I mean, we're still, we're still in the first inning of 3D within retail. I'd like to answer this question by kind of going to where it will be, because I think it helps put it in a little bit of context, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's inevitable is that eventually 3D will become the principal way you see and interact with products online. So imagine every single product page that you'd go to on Amazon or Wayfair or Target.com or Macy's, that it's in fact a 3D model that you can interact with and articulate and pinch and zoom and twirl and spin and download. Eventually 3D will replace all photography on every product page. And that will be from, everything from furniture to shoes to, luxury watches, dog food bottles. It'll be everywhere. But we're probably 10 years away from that. And the reason is 3D is just, it's transformable, it's reusable. You can take 3D and see it in physical space using AR or other applications. You can use that content for advertising. You can use that content for visual merchandising. It's just a very, very malleable asset that people will just come to expect in time. Yeah. So today, the cost of 3D modeling is still quite high. I mean, you could be spending $30, $40, $50, $60, $70 on creating a relatively simple product. And the quality, like the visual quality you can create in 3D, is a live 3D model is still not quite, hyper realistic, right? Like a photo would be. So the cost and the technology have a little bit of ways to go, but the categories that are already out in front are the home category. So furniture is by far the largest use case of 3D for furniture, kitchen, bath, decking, places where you need 3D to do some sort of configuration before you buy a product. Those are the leaders in the space right now.
Yeah, yeah. And what kinds of things are those leaders doing that are setting them apart?
So what's happening is, to use an analogy, like we used to like call a professional to book an airline ticket, right? Because they had a desktop tool and they would tick away at while you're on the phone with them and get you your ticket, right? Yeah. Then, Expedia and Travelocity and all these sites, webified them and made them easy to use and point and click, drag and drop. And all of a sudden we're all, we can all book airline tickets by ourselves. The same thing is now happening for the home industry, where it used to be if you wanted to design a kitchen or a bathroom or, lay out furniture in a virtual space, like there was a desktop tool, you would download Photoshop or some other, professional tool. You had to have a big graphics card and a big processor, and you had to be trained on how to use the software. Now we can take because 3D is now available for browsers. We can take all that software, really make it, drag and drop, super simple, put it on the web, and people can do it themselves. And so, we're doing hundreds of thousands of kitchens and decks and bathrooms, and, where consumers are just doing it themselves. And so now it's becoming like a self-service e-commerce tool to design a kitchen and check out.
Yeah, yeah. Beyond maybe some of the leaders and some of the areas where it's being used, where do you see some other big opportunities in retail, and what kind of benefits do you think it can bring there?
So there's a confluence of variables that have to meet in order for it to work. So for instance, for something like a kitchen, if we created 3D models of like a kitchen catalog, those products, the faucets and the appliances and the counters and the cabinets themselves, like once we create those assets, they're not going to change very often. Yeah. Right? Like once every 2 or 3 years, right? You might update a finish or something. So the cost of creating those assets can be amortized over a long period of time. Then you also look at, well, what's the use case? It's like, well, okay, I actually have to configure this in order to buy a kitchen, and it's a several $1,000s purchase. And so the amortization of the content plus the use case is creating a value proposition that works. So for it to move into other categories, to your question, like let's say handbags, like as an example, will people, use 3D to sort of visualize and interact with a handbag if they're on, Gucci or someplace like that? Well, if it costs you $1,000 to create that 3D asset and that product's out of inventory in 2 months, you're not going to get a return on investment. Right. Then you have to ask the question, well, do people actually really want to be able to hold a 3D Gucci bag in their hand? Like, is the product market fit there? Now, if the cost of creating that handbag is 25 cents, why not, right? You're probably going to get some lift out of that experience. And so it's this, you got to find the cost and the amortization and the use case, and if they all sort of intersect to actually make an ROI that actually works. So that's how we go from category to category and start testing that.
Yeah, I think, and this is probably, to your point, many years out, but I work a lot with organizations where we're working on personalization strategies, and, wouldn't it be great if we could, if you have a product, whatever that product is, in the ad, on the website, in the mobile app, wherever you are, could you see the exact product in the exact angle with, all of those things, true personalization. That becomes really hard when you're doing product photography. You can't take a million photos of every single thing. It sounds like it might be early days to really try something like that at scale, but I definitely see some potential for things like that as well.
Yes. Yeah. You actually, really interesting thing that we're sort of experiencing right now is, let's say you're the manufacturer of a product. Let's just say you're doing furniture and I'm the retailer. And the manufacturer, you may along with me, so I love the couches you manufacture. I'm going to buy them. And then I say, hey, I need to merchandise those couches on my site. Do you have any photography? And you say, yeah, here's some product shots I've made out of 3D, and here's some like lifestyle images, right? Like, in a house and in context, a really nice glossy photo. But my website, I'm the retailer, uses a different background, right? And I only may sell 3 of the 5 products that are in that photo. And so there's this like gap in the market between like what the manufacturers provide and what the retailers want, because they're going to personalize that content to their site. So all of this 3D stuff is actually a great answer to how to solve that. If the manufacturer says, well, here you go, here are the assets, and if you need to produce, custom content for your own merchandising, have at it. Yeah. And so, and then what that also does is now all of a sudden, instead of like using these assets for, you create photography in September and use them all year round, you can create instant content for like holidays, right, and promotions, and so it's much faster, much flexible, much less expensive, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a lot of talk about metaverse and all things related to that for various reasons. Obviously it uses a lot of 3D. How do you see that changing retail and, even what you're doing?
So I'm going to try to be not jaded.
Trust me, I hear you. I'm right there with you.
Well, it's funny. So we wrote the very first augmented reality app for the App Store in November of 11. Yeah. And so we love to be on the bleeding edge. So we love innovation. It's why we do what we do. It's, the best part of the job. I've also lived from AR to VR to MR to XR to now, it's all these different monikers we give the space. I think some of the stuff you're hearing, right? Well, here's where I think there's an absolute no question use case. If you're in some kind of game experience like Roblox or Fortnite and you've got avatars and you want to somehow wrap your personality and brand in like a virtual Nike shoe or a virtual, Gucci bag or what have you, that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, that's just basic like brand advertising and marketing, right? Yeah. Some of these other cases, like we have a lot of furniture clients who, like, hey, what should we do about the metaverse? I'm like, well, man, it's kind of interesting. All you do is talk about creating high quality, realistic assets. And now you want to put them in Roblox. It's basically, cartoonish. Like what's the, there's a little bit of like a logic gap in there somewhere that needs to be sorted. I think, so my view on at least in this, I can only really speak to kind of where I've had some experience, but I think what's really interesting about a metaverse type opportunity for at least the home category is someday when you buy your home, the seller will also give you an exact 3D model, interactive replica of your home to go along with it. And Zillow will have 3D homes that you can download and interact. And so the idea of going out into something like the metaverse, whether it's like internet or connected experience or standalone, and pulling things out of that world and into your own digital version of, your space, I think that's pretty cool. But, the way I think about the metaverse now is the first thing we do when any technology is new is we copy what we already have in that new medium. Yeah. Right. And it's like, that's what we did with websites. They used to look like, they were the taxonomy of a catalog looked like a store. Right. And you had, and then of course that's all, changed. And so to me, creating a virtual mall, and I'm not trying to, sort of downplay the guys that are doing these kinds of things, to create a virtual mall to walk around is like, to me, the equivalent of creating a virtual car lot to walk around to buy a car. Like that makes no earthly sense to me. Like I don't want to walk around a mall. I want the mall to come to me. Yeah. And so, but I think that's how you start, right? The first thing you do is you go, hey, let's emulate the real world, and then we'll iterate and come up with something cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Well, yeah, let's go back to those companies that may not quite be on the cutting edge of using 3D in their retail, but so, getting started and maybe accelerating their 3D usage. So, for those that aren't quite there yet, what are some things that they should be keeping in mind as they're trying to get started in this realm?
Initially, kind of in this space, a lot of early adopters thought of 3D as like an application. Like, I need an augmented reality application, or I need a product configure app, or I need like a room planning app. And that's perfectly fair kind of 3, 4, or 5 years ago. But the truth is there's lots of use cases for 3D. And while you might pilot or beta something, by just buying an individual app, if you're a big enterprise like a Kohler or a Lowe's or a Best Buy or whomever, the 3D really is like a platform decision. You need to buy a content management system, almost like you'd buy a CRM. You wouldn't buy 9 different CRM systems, right? You'd buy one CRM system and deploy it. The same is true with 3D, because you want to repurpose the same asset and you want to deploy it to different applications and you want analytics all in the same place. And so I think the biggest decision, outside of maybe like piloting something, the biggest decision that people need to make first is, okay, what's going to be my content management system first? And then what are going to be my applications second?
And you mentioned analytics, so I'll go there a little bit further. How should those companies be measuring success? Like, what are the metrics that your customers use to measure how well they're doing?
There are a ton of parallels to e-commerce. Things like dwell time, right? We all know if the more time you spend with something, the more likely that you are to buy it. Augmented reality absolutely works. There's no question about it. If AR is available on a product page, you get a 2 to 3 times increase in conversion. It's very consistent.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, some of that's you were interested in the product anyway, so you probably want a discount. But even if you get a 100%, 20% or 30% increase in conversion, that's still pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So what we have learned, though, is augmented reality does not work equally for all things. It's primarily used in the home category as a replacement for measuring. So if you look at what gets used in AR, it's like big things like dining room sets and bedroom furniture and, sectionals. Those are like the most popular categories. People don't really use AR for like lamps and mirrors.
Yeah, I got it.
So you probably don't want to spend money there. But, it's all the same kind of metrics. It's, increases in average order value. It's duration in the application. It's conversion to, leads if you're using it as like a lead generation tool, like into a design team. It is reduction in, returns, because people are able to interact and get a more, make sure they buy the right thing at the right size. So it's very, very similar to, it's all the same metrics that we use to measure, website performance.
Got it. Great. One last question before we wrap up here. We've talked a little bit about current state. We've talked about some future state stuff, but what do you think people wish they would have known about 3D about 5 years from now?
Let's see. I think 3D 5 years from now. I really think that the intersection between 3D and consumers doing more themselves before they make a transaction are directly connected.
Yeah.
And so if I'm again, we really specialize in kind of the home categories, but the rate at which consumers will expect to be able to do more before they talk to a salesperson, because that's kind of the truth. Nobody really wants to go in and talk to a salesperson until they absolutely have to, right?
Yeah.
And nobody ever says it, but that's how we all feel. And, it's why we research the heck out of a restaurant before we call somebody, right? That's what we do. Right. So there's a world of self-service coming that 3D will unlock. And the ones that get there quicker are going to earn a lion's share of customers' attention. And man, we saw this like crazy in COVID when people actually couldn't go into the stores. Like the amount of time we had one lady, I kid you not, she spent 50 hours in a kitchen planning tool and built 10 different kitchens.
Wow.
And, it was probably fun, right? For her.
Right. Yeah. If you're on lockdown as well, it's probably, that's a nice week's work, right?
Yeah. Well, and if it's stuff it's a huge transaction, it's a big dollar purchase. You don't want to make a mistake. And, and we all think we're like, we watch HGTV and we all think we could do that, right? And so it's kind of a little bit of like, playing house, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Beck, thanks so much for joining. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
Sure. Company's called Marxent. You can find us at 3dcloud.com.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Beck Besecker, co-founder and CEO of 3D Cloud by Marxent, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkihlstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.